The ground beneath Sicily is collapsing at this very moment. Recently, a massive landslide tore open a deep chasm at the edge of the hilltop town of Niscemi, severing roads and leaving homes suspended over open space. After days of relentless rain, the slope gave way along a 4-kilometer sliding slope, forcing more than 1,500 people to evacuate as the land continued to slide. Italy now fears that this ancient town could be permanently lost. How can a place that stood for centuries collapse so quickly? And with the ground still sliding, what will happen next? Let's find out. Niscemi sits on a raised plateau in southern Sicily, home to roughly 26,000 people. For centuries, its hilltop position shaped the town's identity. Strategically defensible, agriculturally productive, and historically significant, with roots stretching back through medieval and earlier periods of Sicilian history. Like many elevated towns across the Mediterranean, Niscemi was built to last. Its height offered security and visibility, but that same geography concealed a long-term weakness beneath the streets. Below the town lies a layered mix of soft sedimentary rocks and clay-rich soils. To the naked eye, this ground appears solid, but clay behaves very differently once water enters the system. When dry, it holds firm. When soaked, it softens, weakens, and begins to behave more like a slow-moving paste than stable ground. Beneath Niscemi, water-absorbing layers sit on top of denser rock that resists drainage, allowing rainwater to build up underground instead of flowing away. Over time, this trapped water reduces friction within the slope, making it easier for gravity to pull the ground downslope. Failure rarely happens all at once. Instead, it unfolds as a progressive landslide, with small underground movements growing larger after each major rainfall. Cracks open and close as stress shifts, while buildings can remain standing even as the ground beneath them moves. Positioned on steep, exposed slopes, Niscemi was never truly stable. It was balanced on conditions that would eventually give way. Before we continue, don't forget to click on that subscribe button and like this video, as it's the best way to support this channel. Niscemi is not an isolated case. Sicily is one of the most landslide-prone regions in Europe, shaped by steep terrain, weak geology, and intense rainfall. Across the island, towns and roads have repeatedly been damaged by slope failures, often causing large-scale displacement, despite attracting far less attention than earthquakes or volcanic eruptions. In 1998, rainfall triggered landslides in southern Italy killed more than 150 people, while in 2009, slope failures around Messina destroyed entire neighborhoods. Similar events followed intense rain in 2021 and 2023, forcing evacuations across eastern Sicily. Landslides are often underestimated because they rarely strike with a single headline-grabbing moment. Instead, they unfold quietly, sometimes over days or weeks. The damage accumulates gradually, forcing evacuations long before any dramatic collapse occurs. What makes Sicily particularly vulnerable is the combination of steep terrain and clay-rich, weak sedimentary rocks, which weaken quickly as water saturates the ground. Add human development, roads, buildings, drainage systems that alter natural water flow, and the balance becomes even more fragile. Niscemi fits squarely within this broader pattern. Its collapse was not unexpected. It was the delayed result of geological conditions long primed for failure. The immediate trigger for the landslide in Niscemi was 3 days of continuous heavy rainfall linked to Storm Harry, which affected much of southern Italy. Unlike short storms that pass quickly, this system delivered rain almost non-stop, keeping the ground saturated from the surface down. With no break in rainfall, the soil had no chance to drain or regain strength between rainfall episodes. As rainwater soaked into the ground, it moved downward through the soil until it reached denser layers beneath the town that water could not easily pass through. Instead of draining away, water began to build up underground, weakening the ground from within. As more water accumulated, the soil lost its grip and became easier to move under its own weight. The slope did not collapse in a single moment. Instead, a 4-kilometer-long section of hillside began to fail gradually. Small movements deep underground came first, followed by cracking at the surface. These cracks widened and connected, forming a long rupture along the edge of the town. Over time, sections of the slope slowly slid downward, pulling roads, pavement, and soil apart as they moved. Buildings near the edge often remained standing, even as the ground beneath them shifted, making the danger harder to recognize at first, but also far more serious. Crucially, the ground movement did not stop when the rain ended. Once the slope began sliding, gravity continued to drive movement across the weakened hillside. The saturated soil is still adjusting as internal stresses redistribute underground, and monitoring shows that some sections remain unstable. In the coming days, even small changes, such as additional rainfall or further settling, could reactivate movement along parts of the slope. This is why landslides like the one in Niscemi are difficult to predict and control. Movement may slow, pause, or accelerate again without clear warning. Although Storm Harry triggered the initial failure, the slope itself is now the main concern, and its behavior will depend on how the ground continues to respond. As the ground began to fail, authorities moved quickly to evacuate the most at-risk areas of Niscemi. More than 1,500 residents were forced to leave their homes as entire streets were emptied, even though many buildings showed little visible damage. This is one of the most dangerous aspects of landslides. Structures can appear intact while the ground beneath them continues to move. Exclusion zones were established around the growing fissure, cutting off roads and isolating parts of the town from basic services. Daily life came to a standstill as residents waited for updates, uncertain whether they would ever be able to return. Civil protection teams installed instruments to track ground movement, watching for acceleration that could signal further collapse. Engineers assessed whether stabilization was possible, but options were limited. Reinforcing unstable slopes requires time, access, and favorable conditions, none of which were guaranteed. In clay-rich terrains like Niscemi's, even aggressive engineering solutions can fail if the underlying materials continue to weaken. As of now, parts of the town remain closed off as sections of the slope continue to shift, especially near the edge of the plateau. Authorities have warned that some neighborhoods may never be safe to reoccupy. Many residents remain in temporary accommodation as assessments continue, and the coming days will be critical. Further rainfall could accelerate landsliding, but even dry conditions may not fully stabilize the slope. Niscemi now faces a period of prolonged uncertainty, where decisions about return, rebuilding, or retreat depend on how the ground behaves next. What happened in Niscemi is increasingly relevant far beyond southern Sicily. Across the Mediterranean, many hillside towns, such as Malaga, the hills surrounding Athens, and parts of France's Mediterranean coast, sit on steep, water-sensitive ground and share the same mix of aging infrastructure, fragile geology, and shifting climate patterns. In recent years, these risks have already materialized elsewhere. Hillside towns including Messina and Ischia have experienced destructive rainfall-triggered landslides, forcing evacuations and long-term displacement. Many of these towns were built centuries ago, long before modern understanding of slope stability or water movement. Drainage systems designed for historical rainfall patterns are now overwhelmed, while roads, buildings, and retaining walls have altered natural runoff paths. As rainfall becomes heavier and more persistent, water is increasingly concentrated in ways that destabilize slopes. Niscemi now serves as a clear case study in how disasters emerge not from a single cause, but from the interaction of geology, climate, and human settlement. The lesson is uncomfortable. Even towns that have endured for generations may no longer be viable under the conditions now unfolding. The future of Niscemi remains uncertain. Some sections of the town may be stabilized, while others are likely to be abandoned permanently. Relocation is a painful prospect, but in some cases, it is the only realistic option. Engineering can slow movement, but it cannot always overcome the fundamental mechanics of unstable ground. What makes Niscemi so unsettling is that its disaster did not arrive with violence or spectacle. There was no single moment of destruction to point to, no instant when everything changed. Instead, the land quietly withdrew its support, revealing that stability had always been conditional. This is a reminder that not all disasters strike suddenly. Some unfold gradually, crack by crack, until the ground itself becomes the threat. Niscemi did not collapse in a moment. It is still collapsing now.